WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air every Tuesday at 2:30. We come to you from Star Communications, Channel 16, WCLN Radio. There's a summation in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. I want to thank you for all your comments from our last show we had, and that's particularly as it relates to Falcons Children's Home. That was an excellent, heart-rendering show. Many folks have called and emailed and said, you know, this was an outstanding show, and we appreciate that because we're really looking for as much support as you can to give the Falcons. They do an outstanding job. Today we're kind of transitioning a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we do, and more importantly, the broader scope of that in the world of communications. We're talking with Jeff Nethercutt, Executive Vice President and General Manager of Star Communications right here in Clinton. Jeff, thank you for taking time to be with us this morning and have a conversation about what's going on with Star.
Well, thank you for having me today. I know we had to work a little bit to get our schedules lined up to pull this off, but happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I look at a lot of topics and think about the kinds of things that when the people hear your name, and of course your predecessor, Lyman Horn, is his name is still out there a little bit. People still sometimes will go, well, you mean Lyman's not there? No, Lyman's laid back somewhere, I'm sure.
He's enjoying retirement. Long 37-year career.
And well-deserved, well-deserved.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Your name has been associated with Revenue Manager, Director of Revenue, even President of Corporate Affairs, and now, of course, Executive Vice President and General Manager. You've been at Star long enough, you've seen kind of the inside-out picture of Star Communications.
Right.
Not only do you have the perspective of what it was, you know what it is now, but the vision keeps coming and changing for communications in the world of communications. Let's kind of talk about that, if you don't mind. Kind of give us a perspective from even back to that 1959 era when they all come together. This was a must-do kind of thing for rural folks, was it not?
Absolutely. Star, of course, we just celebrated our 60th anniversary. We had our annual meeting of members on November the 9th, had a great turnout for that, and it was our 60th anniversary in business. Star actually was founded in 1959, as you just alluded to. And was the result of the merger of two smaller telephone cooperatives. Some people don't know that, but the two companies that merged were Lower Cape Fear and the Cumberland Sampson Telephone Cooperative. At that time, it was about 2,900 members, but that is what formed the 10 exchanges that we currently serve today, back in 1959. And of course, over the years, technology has changed by leaps and bounds from that time through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s with the advent of the internet. Broadband is the buzzword of today, and it's what drives the economy today, and education, and just about every aspect of our life is running over a broadband connection. So we've seen a lot of changes over the years, for sure. And
I think those changes are going to be progressive in nature. And since you mentioned the whole broadband thing, one of the things that struck me is a quote that you had in one of the regional economic development folks. You mentioned the fact, the importance, basically, I'll paraphrase here, the dependence now that business has on communications particularly, and the speed of communications. It also reflects on our sometimes ineptness in rural areas to be able to do what folks do in Wake and Greensboro and Mecklenburg and those areas. That's changing so radically. Are we able to keep the pace with it? Is the desire is there, but is the capacity there?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, we've all heard of the digital divide. There has been a digital divide between rural America and urban America. The population, the sparsely populated rural areas, it was difficult for companies to make business cases to serve these areas due to the prohibitive costs for deployment of broadband. We can bridge that digital divide, and I think the cooperatives in the state of North Carolina particularly have done a fantastic job, as have the co-ops all over the United States, in bridging that divide. In North Carolina, there are 7 telephone, or TMCs, telephone membership corporations, and have done a fantastic job in fiber optic deployment. we cover a vast area. Some people may not realize what a large area we do cover. We cover a 5-county area in southeastern North Carolina, approximately 1,458 square miles, 10 exchanges. And to give you some scope and scale as to what that would equate to, it's about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So it's a large area. The cost of deployment of fiber optic and fiber to the home or to the business or to the farm these days, it's very expensive. Our demographic is about 2.8 customers per route mile of cable and about 9 customers per square mile. So you can see it's a fairly sparsely populated rural area. So it is very expensive to do that. But through planning and commitment on our part as a company and a board and an employee body, we've been able to make some pretty good strides at deploying fiber in the rural areas. And of course, we've had some news as of late, which I'm sure we'll get into that at some point, that will expedite that process significantly as we move forward. But you know, when it comes to economic development, when it comes to agriculture these days, and education, primary and secondary education, and distance learning, fiber optic broadband is an absolute must in order to compete with the Raleighs, Greensboro, Charlottes, you know, areas, the more metropolitan areas within the state. So those things are vital and necessary, and that's what the customers and our members demand, and that's what we're expected to do.
One of the things that's just often focused by CEOs and folks in a position that you're in is that you constantly look at numbers and demographics, and of course you've got a background with numbers, so it's not you don't get blind like I do when I'm looking at numbers sometimes. But when you look at that, we've got kind of a divide as well when we look at the demographics of age and expectation. We've got people that's listening to the show today that probably remembers, and I'll throw some names out, back during the era of Al Kohler.
Right.
Even maybe when Mickey Hughes started, both CEOs and so forth at Star.
Right.
There was things there we called landlines, and they had party lines and these kinds of things. And then you've got this group that's never seen that.
Sure.
So your audience that you're playing to is so multifaceted. How big a challenge is that for you as a CEO? And as you look at even your employees probably fit in that category as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we currently employ 95 full-time people, and then we have contract labor as well. But alluding back to the sort of the timeline you just laid out, back late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s, you know, you were looking at 10-party service when Mr. Kohler was the CEO. 10-party service went to 4-party service, which eventually evolved into 1-party service in 1973. And you during that same time frame, you had mechanical switches. That evolved into digital switching in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, Star was the first company east of the Mississippi to have a fully redundant fiber optic ring that connected all 10 of our central offices together and all 10 switches. So the technology has changed vastly over the years, but the demographics have as well, because there are, you know, customers today, especially millennials and people, you know, even that are the age of my children, 26 and 28 years old. The internet's been part of their life their entire life. So the demands that are out there today for faster internet speeds, all the things that those things do are vastly important. I mean, that's the demographic that we're beginning to see within our business. Those older customers that have been with us for a number of years, that are older customers, that some of them have been with us for 40 years, some longer than that. You know, that demographic as well has migrated into the age of the internet and connectivity and those sorts of things. And while their demands may not be as great for streaming video or things of that nature, it is moving in that direction. So we're all being swept into that wave of the internet. You know, you hear the phrase, the Internet of Things. Every device in your home these days, whether it be a cell phone or a tablet or a laptop, even appliances are connected to the internet, and you see all this. But the demographic is changing. You can see it at our annual meetings, sort of the demographic of the people that attend that, and really understand the cooperative model. It's an education process. And in our communication to our members, we try to constantly remind them of the benefits of being a member of the cooperative and what the cooperative brings to them as a member and to the community, and the importance that the cooperatives have played over the course of the last 50 or 60 years in economic development in this part of the state and in all rural parts of the country.
I think your board president did an excellent job at annual meetings, since you mentioned that, in kind of laying out the foundation and the framework of how this cooperative developed and how it growed. And the interesting thing is, you talked about that came to mind because it was almost, as he laid that out, if it were not for people that live here, that stepped up and reached in their own pocket, this cooperative may or may not even got off the ground.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were, at that time, sort of the members of the community took it upon themselves to form these companies. I mean, they wanted the same communications capabilities that the cities had and the larger incorporated areas. And so they would go door to door. Our founders would go door to door and ask people for $10 to work towards the formation of, a telephone cooperative so we could have service in rural areas. They needed the connectivity just like everybody else. And due to the efforts of those founders of the company 60 years ago, we're here today. Now, that has been expanded upon by, as the boards have evolved over the years, and very forward-thinking people trying to lay the groundwork to push this company forward, and other companies as well. A lot of things go on behind the scenes that you really don't see or think about on a daily basis. You see the end result, which is the services that are offered and what you're capable of utilizing the services to do. But over the years, there's been a lot of work and a lot of planning that's gone into trying to stay ahead of the technology curve as it evolved so that you would be ready to do these things. And those founders of our company certainly laid the groundwork and make that possible today.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're talking with Jeff Nethercutt, a 60-year-old company here today. We'll be back in a moment.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air each and every Tuesday. We come to you from Star Communications Channel 16, WCLN Radio, Sampson Weekly Newspaper Summation. We're pleased to be here. My name is J.W. Simmons, and I'm with the CEO, the Executive Vice President, General Manager of Star Communications. I keep saying CEO, it just comes to mind that usually that's the guy in charge of corporate organizations, but you got a title called Executive Vice President, General Manager, simply because you report to a board.
Exactly.
A board that then reports to things that's called members.
Exactly.
And these are the people that served by Star Communications. We've spent a little bit of time just touching on the history.
Right.
And a lot of folks will probably say, I wish you'd have spent more time on that. I wish you'd spent more time talking about party lines.
Right.
But we've got a lot of ground to cover, and I want to kind of segue in from that to kind of this expectation word that the folks that are listening to the show, their expectations may be totally filled. They may have a tube TV, they may care less, and if they've got a landline, God bless them.
Right.
But a large portion of the population is basing their expectation on communication from other areas of the state, or from what Best Buy or Sam's Club or somebody's selling in electronics. How do you mesh that together and say to your members, my members are satisfied? Or should they ever be satisfied?
Well, as the technology evolves, and especially as you alluded to with, video products and even other things that are being purchased today, the technology that we offer is the infrastructure upon which those things run. So there are a few misconceptions out there as it relates to some video products. You talk about a 4K TV these days.
Even 5K.
5K, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
I mean, every year there's something else coming out bigger and better. But there are many times the signals that are provided from, we purchase our content from providers of content, and a lot of cost is associated with the purchase of the content that we send out to our customers. And the signals that we receive to forward that signal to the customer sometimes is not exactly in the same medium as what's advertised as far as what the actual hardware is capable of. So therein lies a little disconnect sometimes that we have to, it's an education process, just making the customer aware of that. And where the medium's different, where we currently still, and our ultimate goal is to have fiber to every customer, but it's a process that takes some time because of the cost involved, and it's just a large project. But you know, depending upon the medium that you have to receive the service, if you're in an area where we don't yet have fiber optics in place and you're on a copper connection or a coaxial connection, you know, traditional cable plant, then the capabilities are limited somewhat. Where we offer what we call our IPTV product, where there's copper plant that's being utilized, there's some limitations in terms of the length of the copper loops that will, you know, facilitate that product. For DSL service, where there's not fiber optics for broadband, DSL works within an 18 kilofoot parameter, or 18,000 feet from a CO or a remote cabinet. Video is about 3,500 feet. So there's some limitations in that and the type, you know, service that you might receive based upon those logistics. The ultimate goal is to get to a fiber optic connection, and once that's accomplished, you know, things are much easier and the service works much better. But you know, we understand that there's some expectations between what a customer may see or has been advertised or that sort of thing when they buy a piece of equipment or a TV or anything else. Video is a very complicated business. There are a lot of moving parts in the video product. You know, the cost continually increases, and it's due to the content providers that we purchase these services from to broadcast to the customer.
How fluid, when we talk about these things, let's talk about business model for a minute. When we think about business models, typically folks would say, okay, that's something you put into place and it's some kind of skeletal structure that this is what we follow to accomplish what our expectation of goals are. So when that business model is constantly changing, how hard is it to deal with that in this kind of world where things are so radically changing? And I'll toss out an example that I'm sure you're on top of is Amazon. Elon Musk has been putting what they call these low altitude satellites.
Low Earth orbit satellites.
There you go. And it's like anywhere from 60 to 100 going up a day, and the prescription of that is, well, it's changing everything because then that will take over the connectivity for folks from everything from telephones and cell phones and other things. What happens in the world behind the curtain, like people like you that are looking at this? Well, what do you see?
Well, one thing, we have a little saying in our industry is wireless doesn't work without wires.
Right.
And we as a provider are, even in a wireless world where there's wireless connectivity that people are enjoy, whether it be through your cellular provider or some other medium, at some point that signal has to hit a tower and hit a fiber optic connection and get back to a switch or some switching situation in order for it to be functional. So we are an important piece in the middle of that whole equation, even if you're using some other medium to utilize your broadband connection over another device. But it constantly, you know, a capital expenditures budget, when it's being prepared on an annual basis, requires a lot of foresight, and sometimes it can be fluid. I mean, you have to, as they say, pivot occasionally in one direction or another to accommodate a need that may arise that you weren't anticipating during the course of a calendar year or a fiscal year.
That quarterly review becomes very important.
Absolutely, absolutely, always. And we're constantly monitoring where we're at during the course of the year as far as our capital expenditures are concerned, and where we concentrate our dollars as it relates to those things. Because we have a lot of people that come to us, we have contractual relationships with you know, tower providers and things of that nature to provide fiber optic connectivity to those areas, so that you know, service is better in some areas than others. As you travel around the state or the country, you know, you'll get in areas where service is not as good as it could be. But typically, we are able to accommodate that within our service territory. We've had a very forward-thinking board of directors over the course of time that has made provisions to put infrastructure in place so that those type things are possible. And without that, and without planning, and even with careful planning at times, there are things that arise that you have to pivot and take care of. But it's a fluid situation, and it's something that you just have to, over time, stay ahead of the technology, stay ahead of the trends that are out there, keep your eye on what you see coming down the road, and try to plan for it. And even with careful planning, sometimes you still have to make changes along the way to accommodate those things.
This brings up another question as you kind of mentioned that part of it. There's also the stability part as far as the corporation itself.
Right.
Stability meaning as these changes occur and technology increases and the advancement of being able to push buttons and make things happen. What does that say to employees and the staples that kind of glue Star Communications together? You and I both know, and of course my wife worked there and retired for some years ago, but things change with the employee structure. Is that strong? Is there the site that you're looking at now, what kind of employee does it demand?
Well, first of all, our employees are the most important part of who we are. They're the people that are out there making things happen every day. We've got a completely devoted workforce. I could tell you many stories over the course of the last several years, hurricanes, natural disasters, where these people have gone the extra mile and given 1,000% to make our company what it is today. But of course, as technology has changed, and as we see it changing down the road, it's gone to a more of as opposed to the old traditional TDM network that we talk about, the copper plant, it's more of an IP network. So that type of employee down the road will be very vital in our industry, more of a technology savvy type person with that type of a background, because today it's more servers and switches and things of that nature that you're dealing with versus what used to be involved within our company and our industry 20, 30 years ago. It's just the nature of who we are. But our workforce, even though that's changed, they have changed with the times and have been able to make that switch and have done a fantastic job. I mean, we've got people that have been with us, we had an employee retire last year, had 45 years of service, which is sort of unheard of these days, that people work in one place that long. But we've got very long tenured, dedicated people that have been with us a long time and as dependable as you can imagine, but very solid people that understand the technology, are willing to take the extra time to make any changes they need to make in terms of their skill sets and what they need to do to bring to work every day to make Star what it is. And I tell anybody who wants to ask me the question, what's the most important thing in your company? It's our people. And it's always been our people. From the day we started back in 1959 till today, it's our employees.
I think you hit on a very good point. And of course, I've talked to some of the employees and some of the folks I say is my age and older. I know them well, and there does seem to be a different kind of employee. I think their commitment is still there. But again, from my position in age-wise, sometimes I go, well, I don't think I would have said so and so. I think we've got a more aggressively outspoken group of employees, and then the era of Al Kohler and Mickey Tew and those eras. Would you agree with that?
I would say so, probably. Yeah. And I think there is, there's maybe a little more level of confidence in what they're, bring to the table every day, and the skill sets that they have that confidence that they're confident in what they do. They know what they're doing, and they do a great job at it.
Absolutely. We're going to take another break. When we come back, I want to touch on the flood situation a little bit, where we're at with that, and then we want to segue over into some of the new technologies fixing to hit the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Executive Vice President, General Manager, Star Communications, Jeff Nethercutt.
You come out to replace a bad sensor, and that adds a 5-year commitment to my contract, and you don't tell me? Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping homes secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We're talking with the Executive Vice President and General Manager, Jeffrey Nethercutt of Star Communications, that airs this show every week at 2:30 on Channel 16 on Tuesdays. Certainly, folks will probably need to understand that this show is also simulcast with WCLN. Right. You guys have had a good relationship with one of the radio stations here. We've reached out and looked at it, hopefully doing some things from Bladen County. I know you and I have talked about that off air, and hopefully we can make that happen in the coming months.
Right.
When I look at the service area you mentioned a while ago, we've been extremely, in one way, blessed, and another way, I guess, hit sideways a little bit with something called hurricanes over the past few years.
That's been a problem.
It has, and as I go by, and many people does, 421, what used to be the main office complex on 421 Star Communication, it still lays a waste out there in the sense of the building. Right. And folks oftentimes will say, you see those people down there, how long is it going to be before they get that building going back? And I don't know how to answer that. So I want you to just, if you don't mind, take a moment, just talk about floods, its impact, the results, where, quote, Star Communication is now. I think the members need to know that.
Sure. Well, there's two dates that'll stick out in my mind forever. One was October the 8th, 2016, and the other September the 14th, 2018. That was the dates for Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Florence.
Double hitter.
Double hitter. Of course, with Matthew, the building, or the original building on that site, was built in 1967. And I was employed at Star through Hurricane Fran, Hurricane Floyd, all the major hurricanes through the late 90s and the early 2000s. Never saw water even approach the building at all. And then, of course, during Matthew, we all saw what happened. We lost the entire building. That building's got approximately 23,000 square feet of office space. We employed approximately 55 people, depending on the situation. 55 to 60 of our 95 employees worked in that building. So it was a huge part of who we were and the community. We lost the building in October 2016. We were out of the building about 10 months, putting it back together, and we're in the midst of going through some mitigation plans to prevent future events. But before we could even put those in place, and we're working with FEMA to facilitate that, and then Hurricane Florence arrives. And unfortunately, the exact same situation. Water throughout the facility, lost the entire building again.
When you're talking throughout the facility, you're talking 4 or 5 feet.
Well, it wasn't that deep. And one thing I learned about water, it doesn't take that much water to do a lot of damage. It never got more than about a foot throughout the building, but of course at that point it wicks up into the cabinetry, the walls, all the floors, the electrical services, plumbing. I mean, it destroys everything. So it's very expensive to put it back together. As I said, we've been back in the building about 13. We were out 10 months, back in 13 months, and then this happened. So we're back in the midst of our work with FEMA to work through this process. Of course, there have to be cost estimates that are put together by FEMA itself. They have a whole area of people, structural engineers, that'll come in, look at the building as it relates to the damage versus the overall value of the structure itself. So we're still in the middle of that. I know it's been about 14 months, but the process demands that you go through each step in order to make sure that you're taken care of and it's done the right way. And we want to make sure that, for our members, to make sure that we are a good fiduciary of their money, and to make sure that we do the proper things to restore a corporate office facility for them to use and for us to work in. And so we're trying to do it in a way that we won't have to face this problem again.
And I think that's probably what folks need to hear more than anything, because a lot of folks, as you know, I pick up on information. That's what I do, is information. But I pick up on information, and people say, well, why are they going back? This is the second hit they've had. Really, they're going to restructure that building. But as you go through this process, each page is more information and gives you better insight on what decision you should make. So with that said, has there been any kind of definite decision made that Star will go back into that building, or are you also opening the door for other possibilities given funding?
There are some other possibilities, and we're working through that process. We should have better direction on that in the next, I'd say, 3 to 4 months as to what path definitively that we'll take. I've actually got a meeting this afternoon with some FEMA officials later today. That's part of this process. But we don't have a definitive path at this time, but we're closer than we have been since the last hurricane in terms of the direction that we're going to head. We have, there are certain things that you're able to do, with insurance and things of that nature, and there was insurance available there, but the building, we did a water abatement process. Once the waters receded, we were able to get people in there to get the wet flooring and walls and tear all that out and dry the building out. So we protected the property in that respect at the time the hurricane took place.
Not concerned about black mold or anything like that.
Right. We were able to get all the wet drywall, carpets, cabinetry, all those kinds of things. Dehumidifiers dry the entire building out, and have climate control the building through HVAC and that sort of thing to try to keep it, as stable as we possibly can, not knowing one way or the other what the final outcome will be with FEMA. But we're certainly working through that process, and the people with FEMA are good people to work with. They want to help you, and at the same time, to try to put you in a situation where you don't have to deal with it going, down the road further. I don't want to put our employees through this again, if it's at all possible, because, we've got our employees we've got our employee body scattered over 5 locations in and around Clinton and in Bladen County. So, we've got those, the administrative office people, our county department, human resources, plant engineering, our customer service people are in various locations around the city of Clinton, and then of course we have an Elizabethtown district office, and we have some people working in that office as well. So communication among the employees sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge, but I will say again, alluding back to what we talked about earlier, is having great employees. Everybody has accepted this and has done their job every day, and they complain very little, if any at all. They come to work, they do their job, and they work to help our customers and our members. It is difficult at times, to say the least. It's not something that you want to go through ever, and having gone through it twice in about 2 years was extremely difficult. But we're hoping that the resolution that we get to once this all plays out will be something that we won't ever have to deal with this again. So that's our goal, and that's our hope, that we can come to that kind of a resolution.
When we look at that, and I think about the hurricane and the weather and those kinds of things, that's unpredictables that oftentimes you try to prepare for, but you can't really prepare for the finite part of it.
Right.
When you look at where you are now as CEO, as the general manager, as executive vice president, as the guy that folks points the finger at it, and why did this happen?
Right.
What do you see as, say, your first comes to mind, the biggest challenge you think about for Star going forward? I know the hurricane stuff we talked about, but what is one of those biggest challenges you think about?
Well, once we get this part of the hurricanes and the natural disasters and the things we've had to deal with behind us, it's furthering the expansion of broadband and our broadband footprint throughout our service territory. Mm-hmm. That is I think that's the biggest challenge that we face. It's an expensive thing, and I know we're going to get into some things a little later to talk about what's going to expedite that process somewhat. But I would say going forward, that's our focus. I think that will bring the value to our customer that they're looking for, what they demand and what they need, whether they're a business customer or a residential customer. whether you have school children or college kids, or you have a small business that utilizes that service, or you're a farmer or a pork and poultry integrator.
Or a big business.
Or a big business, regardless. I mean, that's our focus. And that's probably the biggest challenge. And with us being cover such a vast area, 1,500 square miles of service area, that's a lot of windshield time. That's a huge, huge area to cover. But that's certainly been our focus for the last decade, and will continue to be our focus until we reach our ultimate goal, which would be a fiber connection to everyone.
I was talking with some folks a while back. We were talking about folks that are CEOs and managers that work for a membership corporation, a cooperative, rather than just CEO of a company, private sector otherwise.
Right.
And you guys are literally working for thousands of, quote, bosses out there when you think about what you do. And that sets the pace of what your expectations is.
Right.
And of course you have a face not only in the community, but you're out connected everywhere. With the number of counties and the landscape, it's got to be a heavy weight for you to be able to touch all the areas you want to be in.
It is, and you know, our employees that work in these various areas, they're an extension of us, because they're the face of the company. When you cover that much of a service territory, those folks are the people that are out in the public every day, that are talking to our customers and dealing with our customers, and they know everybody in these areas. So they are extensions of the company itself. I mean, they're the face of the company. They're who they see. But we have always prided ourselves on being good corporate citizens, so we try to support in every area that we serve various organizations, whether it be the schools that we serve, churches, civic clubs, whatever the case may be. We try to support these organizations and to be a good corporate citizen.
And to be a good partner. I think one of the things I've noticed with Star over the years, it's been a good corporate partner to a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
We're going to take our last break. Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be back in a moment. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what has been referred to as a really big deal. So stay tuned, call a friend, tune in for this last segment. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're coming up on the last segment here with Star Communications. I want to kind of start this segment and kind of a quote. We're talking with Jeff Nethercutt, the Executive Vice President, General Manager. But Jeff, I want to start with this quote from Donald D.J. Lavoie, who is the U.S. Department of Agriculture Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development.
Yes.
He's a pretty big deal within himself. But
Absolutely.
He said, one of the things I like to say about this wonderful program, it allows you to live anywhere that you choose to live in this great country of ours. Lavoie said, you still have the ability to connect. Rural America is a great option with broadband, and you having the choice to make the connection. You can stay anywhere that you want to stay, or you choose to stay and have that connection. Absolutely. Now, what I'm talking about here is what's been referred to as a big deal for Sampson and surrounding counties and the service area Star. We're talking about $23.7 million. And the other word that was used, I think I want you to talk about a bit so folks can understand what grant means.
Right.
That's funds that your folks working unilaterally to make this happen. And when I say your folks, I'm talking employees.
Right.
To make this happen. This really is significant for a rural cooperative in an area that sometimes has 4 or 5 people per mile.
Sure. Huge for us. This was some of the best news we've had at Star in a long time when we received word that we had been awarded this grant. It was a very competitive process. The Reconnect process, or the Reconnect program, as a pilot program, was a $600 million program that the Congress, President Trump Congress, and Secretary Perdue was challenged with putting this program into play.
It's a nationwide program.
Nationwide program. It was very competitive. It was broken into 3 segments. It was a $200 million grant-only portion and a $200 million grant loan combination program, and then $200 million of loans. It was oversubscribed well over 100% in terms of the applications versus the amount of funds that were available. We worked on this application about 5 months. It took a long time to put it together, very competitive, very difficult process to identify areas that would qualify based on the speeds. And basically the qualification for it was targeted to areas where you could not offer speeds of 10.1, which is 10 megabits download speed, 1 megabit upload speed. So those were the areas that were as far as targeted in terms of the speeds that could not be achieved, that you were basically looked at as an underserved area. But it was a very arduous process. It took a long time to put this together. So we started work on this in early 2019, late January, early February. The application was submitted in June, and then we were notified. I remember we were notified on October the 25th that we had been awarded. And STAR had the largest application, grant application in the United States at $23.7 million. So we were awarded the largest grant that was part of this particular program. And there'll be other programs to follow. One other thing that certainly has helped us, the state of North Carolina in 2018 started a broadband grant program called the GREAT Act, which is Growing Rural Economies with Access to Technology. That was a $10 million program, and we were an applicant in that program in its inaugural year, and were fortunate enough to be selected as a recipient of a grant award there. That particular grant program was concentrated in Tier 1 counties, Tier 1 economically challenged counties. We were awarded a project in Bladen County that will allow us to build fiber to 463 homes and farms and businesses in Bladen County in 3 separate projects. So with combination with the GREAT grant, which that construction should start very soon and should be completed by July of next year, in conjunction with the Reconnect award that we received. You're talking about over 8,000 homes, farms, and businesses, churches, and critical care facilities over 5 exchanges of STAR's territory as far as the Reconnect program was concerned. So it's been a huge year for us in terms of that and what that means to STAR going forward and where it positions us for the future. It's just a great year for us.
I think that when people see this and they look at it, it becomes apparent, I guess, because of the world we live in today is a world of speed. We're talking about speed here.
Right.
But they're saying, okay, when is this going to happen? There's a timetable on that money. Is it 5 years that you're expected to accomplish that? And it's as though, I'm putting it very simple here, somebody says, here's you a check, put it in the bank, but if you don't do this, again, step by step,
right,
what is it designed to be expended for, and you've got a time frame on it. So what does that do to you as the guy that's looking at all this? Do you have the manpower to put that much cable in the ground? Do you have to call in additional resources? Is there even that many resources available? Because that's, when I look at it from a time point of view,
right,
I don't know whether folks, I've seen these people putting fiber in the ground. Sometimes I've seen them put it in pretty fast, but that's a pretty swift movement. Talk about that a bit.
Right. It is a 5-year time frame for the Reconnect grant, the $23.7 million Reconnect award that we did receive. But there will be outside contractors that come in to facilitate that build. We certainly don't have the manpower as a company to go out and build that over a 5-year period. But yes, the project will be bid out to contractors for construction, and once it'll be a bid process, and of course the low bid will come in, and it could be someone within the state of North Carolina, it could be someone from out of state that wins the low bid that comes in and performs this work. But it is a 5-year time frame. The 5 exchanges within our service territory that are affected, of course, are the Herring Exchange, Six Runs Exchange, the Harrells Exchange, and down into Bladen County, the Kelly Exchange and the Lisbon Exchange. And those are the 5 exchanges that'll be affected by this grant. And of course, one thing I do want to mention too is that in addition to that, we'll continue to try to deploy fiber optics and do construction in other areas as we're able to do. But our focus is going to be, due to the requirements and the time frame that's allocated to do this, is to concentrate on the grant areas to go ahead and get that built and turned up to the customer so that they can take advantage of what will be available to them as this unfolds.
Without getting too far in the weeds, I know there's mapping required. You got to do mapping, you got to do accessibility, you got to ensure you got right-of-ways and all that kind of thing.
Right.
So a lot of that stuff has already been done for many of these areas,
right.
correct? So you're kind of set to go, and when you look at contracting, you mentioned the lowest bid on this stuff. The burden of responsibility to ensure that quality work is done is still on your shoulders, correct?
We have oversight responsibilities. We do have a firm that we work with closely, an engineering firm that basically manages sort of the day-to-day interaction with contractors as the process unfolds. But in terms of how it relates, it integrates into our existing network, we will have some oversight responsibilities where we're responsible for just the overall quality of what's being done. In the end, it'll be our network. So we want it to function the way we're accustomed to and the way we want it to and the way our customers expect it to. So we do have some oversight responsibilities there, but there will be some contract outside labor coming in order to get this done within a time frame that the government has stated that we need to get it done within, which is a 5-year period. The GREAT grant process, or the construction as it relates to Bladen County for the GREAT grant, is a 12-month time frame for that project in Bladen County, and that should be completed by midsummer of 2020.
So I guess another way to look at this, for folks listening today, and I'll say this and you just kind of nod one way or the other if this is correct, don't necessarily expect a truck sitting on your road come January the 3rd with cable ready to plow to your house if you happen to be in the Herring or any of the communities you just named.
Right.
It's going to be a process, but it will be a fast process.
It will be. We simply ask for patience, and you're exactly right, because it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It'll be faster than it could be expected, specifically because of that. Absolutely. We look at this. What this will do in terms of our fiber footprint will take us from about 25 to 30% fiber coverage within STAR's area to about 75% of our area. But it takes time and patience. And we're sort of back in the cooperative structure of where we were in the beginning. We're rebuilding our network, and in the beginning it took time, and this will take some time as well. But be patient with us. We're excited about this, and we're certainly, even though it's going to take a few years to get all this in place, we're certainly going to get to you much quicker than we would have had this not had been a possibility. But I could not be prouder of my staff and everyone that had anything to do with this grant application. I mean, it speaks volumes for the people involved in this process to look at the largest application in the entire United States and to be selected as competitive a process as this was. And we could not be happier. I mean, we've had hurricanes, we've had a lot of things that have adversely affected us, but this has certainly been a bright spot.
Well, it's been an outstanding movement. Again, we've just covered a small portion of what. In fact, you and I talked off air about this. I'd love to have you back every quarter.
Sure.
We just covered a small portion of some things that we would like to talk about today. I know there's a lot of questions that folks there's going to say to me, well, you should ask him this, you should ask him that. We're just kind of breaking the ice on this, so maybe you can come back and touch on that. I'll give you about 15 seconds for anything that you want to say to employees or to members.
Oh, well, we want to thank everybody for being patient with us during the adverse things that we've experienced with hurricanes, and we still feel like we certainly we try to be as attentive as we can be, and we're here to help you.
Again, thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you again Tuesday, 2:30, every Tuesday. The name of the show is We Should Know. We have guests just like the one you've heard today, people with in-depth insight into what's going on in the area. And as always, we wish you a happy holiday, and we wish that you have a God-blessed season. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.